Hi everyone, this is our channel Around My Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
My son killed me. Yes, you read that correctly. I am not a ghost or an evil spirit that needs rescuing. I have a brave heart. My name is Megan, and I hope to inspire you with my story. I lived with my father and my sister Marlene after the death of my mother, who died from an illness. Though I was only 18 years old, I became responsible for taking care of my whole family. I did everything for them, like cooking, cleaning, washing, etc. My father was a great man, and he did his best to make us happy. I supported both my sister and my father. We faced a lot of problems together: illnesses, financial problems, school, and the like. But there came a day when I had to make a life and death decision at my young, tender age. I fell in love, as any girl my age tends to do. My sweetheart turned out to be loved my neighbor, a guy named Dave. We had grown up together, and we shared everything: love, sadness, jokes. Our dreams had evolved as we grew up, too, so we decided to marry. He knew all about my life circumstances, so he chose a flat near my family for me. We had a nice party and celebrated with our families and friends. Every day, he proved himself to be a responsible man. He loved and respected me, and I him. Finishing my studies was one of my dreams, and Dave supported me in every way to achieve it. But my biggest dream was to have a baby. But sometimes life just isn't fair. One day, while cleaning the house, my heart began beating rapidly, and I couldn't breathe well. I was barely able to call out to Dave, who came immediately when he heard me cry for help. I had had this symptom before when I was younger, but I never told my father because I didn't want to worry him. Dave took me to the hospital, where a doctor said I had a serious heart condition. And not only that, I was pregnant too. Pregnancy and a heart condition do not a good combination make. So we had to choose between the baby's life or mine. My father and Dave asked me to abort the baby, though they tried hard to persuade me. I resolutely refused. I agonized a lot during my pregnancy. My father and Dave were so worried for my safety. My father and Marlene left their flat to live with me. In addition, Dave cut back on his working hours to stay with me. The day came when I went into labor. They took me to the hospital, where the doctor checked me over and pronounced that my condition was so serious that I wouldn't be able to survive the childbirth. My family and I were shocked. I held Dave's hand and told him that I was strong enough to survive this. Dave hugged me, crying tears like a river. I was so afraid, but I did my best to hide that fact. I looked to my protruding belly and said to my baby, "I want you to know that I sacrificed myself for you. You had better grow up to be a great young man. I love you." Then the baby started pushing its way into this world. The scene fades to blackness. The baby is born. Suddenly, a year later, a birthday party is being held. The baby is now 1 year old. A woman is singing with the baby and her family. The woman looks at you and winks. Megan says, "Haha, fooled you. I lived through the childbirth. Sometimes life gives us a second chance, but you have to be willing to accept the risk."
My name is Laura, and as a child, I craved unconditional love. But instead of cuddles and family outings, my lasting memories are of bitter rows. My mom never wanted children, she says. She told me that the only reason she didn't get an abortion was that she found about the pregnancy too late. My dad left when I was very young, which made my mother resentful. She had to stay and be the responsible mom, which she hated. On one occasion, my grandparents took me away, and I remember thinking, this is what family should be like. The relationship dissolved completely when I was a teenager. My mom's first love was always men, and when I was 15, she moved to Africa for a boyfriend without telling me. It's something I found impossible to forgive, especially as there has never been an explanation or even an apology. She has contacted me since, but always asking for money. That's why I made the decision to cut all ties with her. I put my mother's behavior down to a horrible upbringing, but she can't make the same excuses for her father. Dad had a lovely childhood, but he has no emotions or empathy for anyone. We haven't spoken in 7 years. Although she's so close to his parents and they encouraged her and her dad to repair the damaged relationship, it brought her nothing but more hurt. After he left my mom, he went on to have a new family. That was really hard for me to handle when he's made so little effort with me. My issues with my mom and dad have badly affected my mental health all throughout my life. I see a therapist regularly now to try to help me deal with the emotions. When I get married next year, neither of my parents will be invited. I grew up thinking I did something wrong for my parents not to want me. My only regret is not telling my dad how much I hated him. I don't hate my mom. I just feel sorry for her and I wish she could see what she's done. Ending all contact with a parent may sound extreme, but for me, it was an act of self-preservation. My dad left when I was 8, and I haven't spoken to my mom once since I moved to Germany 10 years ago. She wasn't maternal and had a really bad temper, which she took out on me. She would never be affectionate, and I felt unloved. I believe my mother may have had a miserable childhood, which meant she lacked the emotional tools to be a good parent. After I grew up and had my own daughter, our relationship got even worse. My mother never came to see me or her granddaughter, but she did form a close bond with her son's new family. It hurt me that she made an effort to spend time with my brother's children and not mine. Over time, I have come to terms with the fact that she never loved me. I don't hate her or feel sorry for her. I just don't want her in my life anymore. Andy hasn't spoken to mom for 25 years, after they stopped communicating in his early 20s. For him, the problem was a lack of respect and common values. I grew up in a children should be seen and not heard household, where my parents' opinion was the only right one. We would have dinner in silence, and my parents never encouraged me in my interests or activities. He says he was never praised for his achievements, only criticized for doing wrong things. Whatever I did, it was never good enough. If I did well at something, my dad would always have to prove he was better. The house rules were strict, and he was sent to bed by 10 p.m. every night, even at the age of 16. But instead of sleeping, Andy found himself listening to the radio to escape the boredom. He quickly became interested in current affairs and politics, which gave him a new insight into the world. It made me realize that my parents' views were snobby, sexist, and racist. I was never allowed to voice any opinion that contradicted their views or I'd be sent to my room. It made me lose respect for them. Andy and I were living in the same house, but we hadn't had a conversation for over a year. I can't say I regretted not making up with him. He was miserable to be around. Several years later, Andy graduated from university and bought a house. I was so proud, but my mom told me it was horrible. She said it looked like a council house and asked why he wanted to live in a slum. As his career advanced, she became more critical and constantly compared him with his half-brother. I was 21 and felt successful, but she was ashamed of everything I did because it didn't fit her snobbish ideals. Eventually, he stopped contacting both my mother and his brother, and has never looked back. It wasn't really a difficult decision to make because we had nothing in common and they didn't accept me or my life choices. Andy understands why some people see this as a surprising decision, but has no interest in sustaining a relationship for the sake of it. I feel like seeing your parents out of duty is wrong. If you have made no effort to build a relationship with your children, I don't think you can expect them to be there. For other families, the rift is a result of the parents' divorce. Like my friend Helen, she lost contact with 2 of her 4 adult children this year, after ending an emotionally abusive relationship with her father. Since they separated in 2011, it's been a slow process of parental alienation. Her son hasn't spoken to her since last year, and her middle daughter is now ghosting her on every channel of communication. She believes her former partner has used the same manipulation tactics on her children as those that destroyed their marriage. Once the kids got older and she developed her own life and interests, her ex became controlling and tried to stop her from doing the things that she liked. During a period of gaslighting that spanned many years, she says he told lies about her behavior to friends and family. Once he told them she was drunk and suicidal and she had gone missing. In reality, she had gone to the supermarket. When she joined a local band, he told everyone she was crazy and that she wanted to run away and become famous. Over time, her husband's side of the story was believed, and Helen began feeling alienated from her family. She sadly lost her mom a few years ago, and her dad is a man's man and took her ex's side. The divorce impacted the children big time and damaged them emotionally. Despite making every effort to build bridges with her children, she admits she doesn't know what their father has told them. He has always made an argument before parties and celebrations to prevent her from coming to the event. He also accused her of having an affair, even though she never cheated on him. The relationships with her two estranged children became so strained that she wasn't given a chance to discuss what had happened. The only explanation they've ever given her is that she doesn't care about them or that she treats them as little kids. Though losing contact has been an extremely painful experience for both of us, I don't blame anyone. Not me, not my mom, not Helen, and not her children. It's no one's fault. I can very much relate to how Helen's children felt. They're like goldfish swimming in a tank where someone keeps adding a tiny bit of color every day until they start to see things in a completely different way. I would love a chance to reconnect with my mom, but I can't see how it will happen. At the moment, I feel like I'm standing outside and they're inside a glass room. I really miss my mom, my brother, and definitely my dad.
There are all kinds of mistakes. Some are forgiven, some are forgotten. Some are borne by others, and some you pay for all the days of your life. These mistakes dog you relentless, even in your dreams. I've made mistakes in my lifetime, and I paid dearly for them. My name is Patricia. I am 19 years old, and I don't think I'm arrogant. I do think that I'm the most beautiful girl in my neighborhood. I live with my parents and twin brothers. Many boys in the neighborhood want to date me. My mom always encouraged me to think independently and to ignore other people's opinions. She told me to do whatever I wanted. Father was quite the opposite. He was always admonishing me to watch my behavior and behave myself. But I preferred my mother's advice, to be free and act on my own. My friends were like me. We were carefree and impulsive. We made bets about boys and love. We would flirt with boys and choose our victims and then cheat on them at the end to turn the tables on them. Playing frivolously with people's feelings was a bad thing, but I enjoyed it in a cruel sort of way. It thrilled and empowered me. But things changed when a guy named Jack saved my life one day. I was walking down the street alone while listening to music when a speeding car almost ran me down because I wasn't paying attention to where I was walking. Jack appeared from nowhere and pulled me out of harm's way and rescued me. He asked me if I was okay, and I said I was. He offered to drive me home, and I accepted. We didn't say a word during the drive. When we arrived home, I wrote my phone number on a piece of paper, along with a note telling him to call me in 2 hours. He did, and we talked until daylight. Jack was handsome, with brown eyes and well-tanned skin. He was a courageous man who protected me and helped me achieve all my dreams while we were together. If anyone annoyed me, I would go to him and he would embrace me in his arms to calm me. I felt safe whenever I was with him. We got engaged, had a small wedding with families and friends, and began enjoying our new life together. But my friends grew jealous of my newfound happiness, and they didn't like Jack. They thought that I deserved a better man. In the beginning, I tried to ignore their sniping at Jack, but I ended up being negatively biased towards Jack and began unintentionally sabotaging our relationship. I accused him of blocking me from achieving my dreams and of not caring about me. He promised me that after his graduation, he would find a job. I didn't believe him and asked to break off our engagement. He begged me not to and cried. But I had made my decision. I was torn between his love and my friend's jealousy and envy. I ended up losing him. Then I met Mark, a funny, blonde, rich guy with a nice car. Many girls wanted to marry him, but I pursued him and beat them all. I sensed that he didn't seem to care as deeply for me as Jack had, and that he didn't care about my safety as much either, but I dismissed my intuition. After all, he bought me anything I desired. So we decided to marry. Still, a little voice in my head kept whispering to me that I was making a big mistake by marrying Mark. After our marriage, we lived in a big villa with a swimming pool and lots of servants. But Mark changed after a while. He became irrational and paranoid. He began controlling everything in my life, even my lifestyle and my behavior. He raged a lot. Finally, I told him that I was fed up with his behavior, and that I didn't like being controlled by him like a dog on a leash. He sneered that he owned me because he gave me all his money to spend. I stopped making love to him, so he began raping me when the mood struck him. This made me miss Jack and his deep love for me. I cried a lot during our now miserable relationship. I was so distraught that I went to see a doctor with one of my friends. After checking me over, the doctor told me that I was pregnant. I was torn between joy and sadness. When I told Mark about my pregnancy and situation, he told me that we were still young and that I should abort the baby. And he threatened me, said if I didn't get an abortion, then he would do it himself. I furtively collected all my things one night and ran away to another state. I didn't know how to start over. I stayed in a motel for a while and worked in a restaurant as a waitress. I agonized a lot during my pregnancy about whether to have the baby or not. I had a kind colleague named Veronica, and I told her my story. She sympathized with me and asked me to come live with her. One day, I had a strong stomach pain in my 7th month of pregnancy, and she took me to the hospital. I was surprised to find that the birthing assistant was none other than Jack himself. We looked at each other silently for a moment. Then he asked me about my life, and I cried and asked him to help me. I saw the love in his eyes, and he told me that he would do his best to help me and the baby. Before the surgery, I held his arm and asked him to forgive me. He shushed me to be silent and confessed that he still loved me. I cried like a baby. He hugged me and made me feel warm and safe. His loving smile was the last thing I remembered before going under the anesthesia. I woke up in a room full of flowers with my Veronica smiling beside me. Jack knocked on the door and entered with a nurse in tow behind him. She was holding my baby, and they congratulated me for having a beautiful little girl. After that, he visited me every day at the hospital. I told him everything about my miserable life. He offered to let me live with him and promised to take care of me and the baby. I felt that my life was finally on the right track, and that life would forgive all my many mistakes. I even forgot my miserable past. But unfortunately, cruel life was finished with me yet. One day, I received a letter from Mark threatening me, saying that I would pay for running away from him. I immediately told Jack, and he reassured me and told me not to be afraid, that he would protect me with his life. Soon afterwards, my fears came true when the doorbell rang, and Jack opened the door to find Mark pointing a gun at him. Mark said coldly, "Do you imagine that you could take Patricia away from me? You can't." And then he laughed and pointed the gun toward me. I screamed and closed my eyes. When I opened my eyes again, I saw Jack standing in front of me, with blood gushing from his chest. He had told me that he would protect me with his life, and he did. I rushed over to Mark. We struggled. The gun went off, and Mark fell to the floor, dead. I'm sitting in my prison cell. I had lost everything: my life, my love, and ultimately my daughter. Life had exacted a high payment from me for making too many mistakes in my life.